तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, my dear friends. I am making this video on Atma Bodha. Atma Bodha is a short Sanskrit text attributed to Adi Shankara of Advaita Vedanta school of Hindu philosophy. The text in 68 verses describes the path to self-knowledge or the awareness of Atma. The Vedanta tradition states that the text was written by Shankara for his disciple Sananandana, also known as Padampada. Atma means self-knowledge, self-awareness, or one with the possession of a knowledge of soul or the supreme spirit. The authorship of Atma Bodha, written in Sanskrit language, is traditionally ascribed to Adi Shankara, who is believed to have lived in the 8th century AD. The original text consists of 68 verses and describes the way to the attainment of the knowledge of the Atma. As in Viveka Chudamani, Sankara teaches that the ultimate reality or Brahma, the foundation of all, is beyond name and form, is of the nature of pure consciousness, but who can be realized by pursuing the path of knowledge, not by worship. For the wisdom of the self is the one way to freedom, leading beyond all other paths. As cooking cannot be accomplished without fire, so freedom cannot be attained without wisdom. Atma Bodha text reiterates that the path of knowledge consists in Shravana, hearing the instructions of a teacher, Manana, reflecting on what is heard, and Nididhyasana, meditating on truth with single-minded devotion. Viveka, philosophical discrimination, and Vairagya, renunciation of all that which is unreal, are the basic disciplines required to be followed, and that is not possible for religious actions, karma, fasting, vow, pilgrimage to destroy ignorance, avidya, and cause liberation, that is moksha. Religious works cannot destroy ignorance, for it is not in conflict with ignorance. Knowledge alone destroys ignorance as light destroys dense darkness. Sankara describes the world and the individual soul are in true essence Brahma, the absolute reality with the nature of Satya Chit Ananda or truth consciousness bliss. Brahma is the substratum on which is projected by imagination all the manifested things of the world. The all-pervading Atma illumining the mind and the senses shines in the intellect buddhi just as the reflection in a mirror. The yogi, endowed with complete enlightenment, sees through the eye of knowledge the entire universe in his own self, regards everything as the self and nothing else. The self-abiding Jivan Mukta states of Atma Bodha is satisfied with his state of bliss derived from Atma. Soul self is free from hate for anyone, seeks unity, is perfected in peace, grows radiant, rejoices with what he has, is the one who shines inwardly like a lamp placed inside a vase. Through study, reflection, and meditation, You exhaust your vasanas, desires, and discover your real self. Through you, it is through your self effort you gain the knowledge of self, and by discovering your inner self, you experience the infinite, all pervading Brahma. I start the actual text of Atma Bodha from verse 1 onward. I will just give the translation only. The first verse. I am composing the Atma Bodha, this treatise of the knowledge of the self for those who have purified themselves by austerities and are peaceful in heart and calm, who are free from cravings and are desirous of liberation. Verse number 2. Just as the fire is direct cause for cooking, so without knowledge no emancipation can be had. Compared with all other forms of discipline, knowledge of the self is the one direct means of for liberation. Verse number 3. Action cannot destroy ignorance, for it is not in conflict with or opposing to ignorance. Knowledge does verily destroy ignorance as light destroys deep darkness. Verse 4. The soul appears to be finite because of ignorance. When ignorance is destroyed, the shell, which does not admit of any multiplicity, truly reveals itself by itself like the sun when the clouds pass away. Verse number 5. Constant practice of knowledge purifies the self. Jivatman stand by ignorance and then disappears itself as the powder of the katka nut settles down after it has cleansed the muddy water. Verse number 6. The world which is full of attachments, aversions, etc. is like a dream. It appears to be real as long as it continues, but appears to be unreal when one is awake. When true wisdom dawns. Verse number 7. Jagat, the Jagat appears to be true Satyam so long as Brahma, the substratum, the basis of all this creation, is not realized. It is like the illusion of silver in the mother of pearl. Verse 8. Like bubbles in the water, the worlds rise, exist, and dissolve in the Supreme Self, which is the material cause and the proof of everything. Verse number 9. All the manifested world of things and beings are projected by imagination upon the substratum, which is the eternal all-pervading Vishnu, whose nature is existence, intelligence, just as the different ornaments are all made out of the same gold. Verse number 10. The all-pervading Akasa appears to be diverse on account of its association with various conditioning upadhis, which are different from each other. Space becomes one on the destruction of these limiting adjuncts. So also the omnipresent truth appears to be diverse on account of its association with the various upadhis and becomes one on the destruction of these upadhis. Verse number 11. Because of its association with different conditionings, such ideas as caste, color, and position are superimposed upon the Atma as flavor, color, etc. are superimposed on water. Verse 12. determined for each individual by his own past actions and made up of the five elements that have gone through the process of fivefold self-division and mutual combination. Panchikarna are born the gross body, the medium through which pleasure and pain are experienced, the tent of experiences. Verse number 13. The five pranas, the 10 organs, and the manas and buddhi formed from the rudimentary elements, tanmatras, before their fivefold division and mutual combination with one another, Panchikarna, and this is the subtle body, the instruments of experience of the individual. Verse number 14. Avidya, which is indescribable and beginningless, is the causal body. Know for certain that the Atma is other than these three conditioning bodies, upadhis. Verse number 15. In its identification with the five seats, the immaculate Atma appears to have borrowed their qualities upon itself, as in the case of a crystal which appears to gather upon itself color of its vicinity, blue, cloth, etc. Verse number 16. Shuddha Swarup, through discriminative self-analysis and logical thinking, one should separate the pure self within from the seeds as one separates the rice from the husk, bran, etc. that are covering it. Verse number 17. The Atma does not shine in everything, although he is all pervading. He is manifest only in the inner equipment, the intellect buddhi, just as the reflection in clean mirror. Verse number 18. One should understand that the Atma is always like the king, distinct from the body, senses, mind, and intellect, all of which constitute the matter, Prakriti, and is the witness of their functions. Verse number 19. The moon appears to be running when the clouds move in the sky. Likewise, to the non-discriminating person, the Atma appears to be active when it is observed through the functions of the sense organs. Now, verse 20. Depending upon the energy of vitality of consciousness, Atam Chaitanya, the body, senses, mind, and intellect engage themselves in their respective activities, just as men work depending upon the light of the sun. Verse number 21. Fools, because they lack in their powers of discrimination, superimposes on the Atma the absolute existence, knowledge, Satyachit, all the varied functions of the body and the senses, just as they attribute blue color and the sky to the and like to the sky. Verse 22. The tremblings that belong to the waters are attributed through ignorance to the reflected moon dancing on it. Likewise, agency of action, of enjoyment, of other limitations which really belong to the mind are delusively understood as the nature of the self Atman. Verse number 23. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived to exist so long as buddhi or mind functions. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind alone and not to the Atma. Verse number 24. Just as luminosity is the nature of the sun, coolness of water, and heat of fire, so too the nature of the Atma is eternity, purity, reality, consciousness, and bliss. Verse number 25. By the indiscriminate blending of the two, the existence, knowledge aspect of the self and the thought wave of the intellect, there arises the notion of I know. Verse number 26. Atma never does anything, and the intellect of its own accord has no capacity to experience I know. But the individuality in us, delusory, thinks he is himself the seer and the knower. Verse number 27. Just as the person who regards a rope as a snake is overcome by fear, so also one considering oneself as the ego jiva is overcome by fear. The egocentric individuality in us regains fearlessness by realizing that it is not a jiva but is itself the supreme soul. Verse number 28. Just as a lamp illumines a jar or a pot, so also the Atma illumine the mind and the sense organs, etc. These material objects by themselves cannot illumine themselves because they are inert. Verse number 29. A lighted lamp does not need another lamp to illuminate its light. So too, Atma, which is knowledge itself, needs no other knowledge to know it. Verse number 30. By a process of negation of the conditionings, upadhis, through the help of the scriptural statement, it is not this, it is not this, the oneness of the individual soul and the supreme soul as indicated by the great Mahavakyas has to be realized. Verse number 31. The body, etc., up to the causal body, ignorance, which are objects perceived, are as perishable as bubbles, realized through discrimination that I am the pure Brahma, ever completely separate from all these. Verse number 32. I am other than the body, and so I am free from changes such as birth, wrinkling, senility, death, etc. I have nothing to do with the sense objects such as sound and taste, for I am without the sense organs. Verse number 33. I am other than the mind, and hence I am free from sorrow, attachment, malice, and fear, for he is without breath and without mind. Pure, etc., is the commandment of the great scriptures, the Upanishads. Verse number 34. I am without attributes and actions, eternal, nitya, without any desire and thought, nirvikalpa, without any doubt, niranjana, without any change, nirvikalpa, without form, nirakara, ever liberated, nitya mukta, ever pure, nirmala. Verse number 35. Like the space, I feel all things within and without, changeless, and the same in all at all times. I am pure, unattached, stainless, and motionless. Verse number 36. I am verily that Supreme Brahma alone, which is eternal, pure, and free, one indivisible and non-dual, and the nature of changeless knowledge infinite. Verse number 37. The impression I am Brahma, thus created by constant practice, destroys ignorance and the agitation caused by it, just as medicine or rasayana destroys disease. Verse number 38. Sitting in a solitary place, freeing the mind from desires and controlling the senses, meditates without unswerving attention on the Atma, which is one without a second. Verse number 39. The wise one should intelligently merge the entire world of objects in the Atma alone and constantly think of the self ever as contaminated by anything as the sky. Verse number 40. He who has realized the Supreme discards all his identification with the objects of names and forms. Thereafter, he dwells as an embodiment of the infinite consciousness and bliss. He becomes the Self. Verse number 21. There are no distinctions such as knower, the knowledge, and the object of knowledge in the Supreme Self. On account of its being of the nature of endless bliss, it does not admit of such distinctions within itself. It alone shines by itself. Verse number 42. When this, the lower and the higher aspects of the self are well joined together, the fire of knowledge is born from it, which in its mighty conflagration shall burn down all the fuel of ignorance in us. Verse number 43. The Lord of the early dawn, Aruna himself, has already looted away the thick darkness when soon the sun rises. The divine consciousness of the self rises when the right knowledge has already killed the darkness in the bosom. Verse number 44. Atma is an ever-present reality, yet because of ignorance it is not realized. On the destruction of ignorance, Atma is realized. It is like the missing ornament of one's neck. Verse number 45. Brahma appears to be a jiva because of ignorance, just as a post appears to be a ghost. The egocentric individuality is destroyed when the real nature of the jiva is realized as the self. Verse number 46. The ignorance characterized by the notions I and mine is destroyed by the knowledge produced by the realization of true nature of the self. Just as right information removes the wrong notion about the direction. Verse number 47. The yogi of perfect realization and enlightenment sees through his eyes of wisdom jnana chakshu the entire universe in his own self and regards everything else as his own self and nothing else. Verse number 48. Nothing whatever exists other than the Atma, the tangible universe is verily Atma, as pots and jars are verily made of clay and cannot be said to be anything but clay, so too to the enlightened soul and that is perceived in is the self. Verse number 49. A liberated one endowed with self-knowledge gives up the traits of his previously explained equipments upadhis and because of his nature of Satchit Ananda, he verily becomes a Brahma like the whom he grows to be a Vaspi. Verse number 50. After crossing the ocean of delusion and killing the monsters of likes and dislikes, the yogi who is uniting with peace dwells in the glory of his own realized self as an Atman. Verse number 51. The self-abiding Jivan Mukta relinquishing all his attachments to the illusory external happiness and satisfied with the bliss derived from the Atman shines inwardly like a lamp placed inside a jar. Though the lies in the conditionings Upadhis, he, the contemplative one, remains ever concerned with the anything, or he may move about like the wind perfectly unattached. Verse number 53. On the destruction of the Upadhis, the contemplative one is totally absorbed in Vishnu, the all-pervading spirit, like water into water, space into space, and light into light. Verse number 54. Realizing that to be Brahma, the attainment of which leaves nothing more to be attained, the blessedness of which leaves no other blessing to be desired, and knowledge of which leaves nothing more to be known. Verse number 55. Realize that to be Brahma, which when seen leaves nothing more to be seen, which having become One is not born again in this world, and which when knowing leaves nothing else to be known. Verse number 56. Realize that to be Brahma, which is existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute, which is non-dual, infinite, eternal, and one, and which fills all the quarters, above and below, and all that exist between. Verse number 57. Realize that to be Brahma, which is non-dual, indivisible, one and blissful, and which is indicated in Vedanta as the immutable substratum realized after the negation of all tangible objects. Verse number 58. Deities like Brahma and others taste only a particle of the unlimited bliss of Brahma and enjoy in proportion their share of that particle. Verse number 59. All objects are pervaded by Brahma, all actions are possible because of Brahma. Therefore, Brahma permeates everything as butter permeates milk. Verse number 60. Realize that to be Brahma, which is neither subtle nor gross, neither short nor long, without birth or change, without form, qualities, color, and name. Verse number 61. That by the light of which the luminous orbs like the sun and the moon are illuminated, but which is not illumined by their light, realize that to be Brahma. Verse number 62. Pervading the entire universe outwardly and inwardly, the Supreme Brahma shines of itself like the fire that permeates a red hot iron ball and glows by itself. Verse number 63. Brahma is other than this, the universe. There exists nothing that is not Brahma. If any object other than Brahma appears to exist, it is unreal like the mirage. Verse number 64. All that is perceived or heard is Brahma and nothing else. Attaining the knowledge of the reality, one sees the universe as the non-dual Brahma, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. Verse number 65. Though Atma is pure consciousness and ever present everywhere, yet it is perceived by the eye of wisdom alone, but one whose vision is obscured by ignorance, he does not seize it, as the blind do not see the resplendent sun. Verse number 66. The Jiva, free from impurities, being heated in the fire of knowledge, kindled by hearing, and so on, shines of itself like gold. Verse number 67. The Atma, the sun of knowledge that rises in the sky of the heart, destroys the darkness of the ignorance, pervades and sustains all and shines and makes everything to shine. Verse number 68 and the final verse. He who renouncing all activities, who is free of all the limitations of time, space and direction, worships his own Atma, which is present everywhere, which is the destroyer of heat and cold, which is bliss eternal and stainless, becomes all-knowing and all-pervading and attains thereafter immortality. Om Tat Sat. So here ends this video. Thank you, my dear friends, for listening and watching this video. Please like, comment, and share this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you. Thank you, my dear friends.